In this video, we are going to look at the IELTS Task 1 academic bar graph questions. By the end of this video, you are going to know exactly how to respond to these questions, and you're going to feel a lot more confident about them. Now, to start, let's take a look at this bar graph. This is a triple bar graph, and I wanted to use this bar graph because it's a bit more challenging than some of the other bar graphs that you might get. Now, the reason that this is a bit more challenging, we will see in just a second, but to start, it is a triple bar graph, which is slightly less common. It also packs in a lot of data. We will see that when we try to write our introduction especially. Also, there's not a lot of beautiful, exciting data to work with. It's a bit more general and boring. So for those reasons, this is going to be a bit harder than the others, and that's why I think this will be a good lesson for you. Now, the first thing that we need to do is not start writing. The first thing is we need to understand what we are looking at. So, if we take a deeper look at this question here, we can clearly see, based on the title, that we are looking at a triple bar graph that is showing the results of a survey about people's coffee and tea buying and drinking habits in 5 Australian cities. We can see that it's measured in percents. We can also see that there are 3 groups of data. So we have in the black bold color, we have fresh coffee. Then we also have instant coffee. And then we also have in the third box the amount of people, or the proportion of people, who went to a cafe for coffee or tea. And all of this is within the last 4 weeks. So now that we understand what we're looking at, and we've read the question, we've looked at all the different types of data that's being presented, we are ready to move on and start to make an outline. Now, to make an outline, not just in bar graphs, but also line graphs, tables, everything else, there's usually a few key questions that you can ask yourself. A few key questions that I'm going to ask myself here are, what is the highest? What is the lowest? Are there any trends or patterns? And are there any exceptions? So now if we take a closer look and we ask ourselves those questions, we can see some important data here. What is the highest and what is the lowest? Well, we can see that the proportion of people who bought fresh coffee in the last 4 weeks is the lowest. It's lowest in every city. Now, we can also see that in Sydney, Melbourne, and Hobart, the proportion of people who went to a cafe is significantly higher. We can also see similarly that in almost every city, the largest proportion of people chose cafes compared to buying fresh or instant coffee. However, there is one exception, which is that in Adelaide, it's the only city that a larger proportion of people chose to buy instant coffee than to go to a cafe. And now, if I want to add one more detail here, I could look again at fresh coffee, and I could see that there is a unique low point, which is that Brisbane and Adelaide, they're the only cities that were under 35%. So when I go ahead and I discuss fresh coffee in one of my main bodies, I can also add that in there if I feel like I want to. So now that we've almost made our outline, we've identified all the important information, we need to go ahead and start to organize it, which is really going to pull our outline together. So for my overview, I want to mention fresh coffee being the least popular, and that cafes were the most popular, with the exception of Adelaide. Now, for main body number 1, I want to mention the 3 top cafe cities: Melbourne, Hobart, and Sydney. Second, I want to mention that buying fresh coffee was the most popular in Sydney and Melbourne, while it was the least common in Brisbane and Adelaide. So the logic here is that I'm talking about the highest and the lowest points. Now for my second main body, I'm going to focus on instant coffee, that the percent was highest in Hobart and Brisbane, and mention again the exception about Adelaide. Now, at this point, I am ready to start writing my response. So let's start with the introduction. The bar chart illustrates the results of a survey regarding the coffee and tea consumption and purchasing patterns of residents in 5 major Australian cities: Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, and Hobart in the last 4 weeks. The results are divided into 3 categories: buying fresh coffee, buying instant coffee, and visiting a cafe for coffee or tea. Now, this is a good introduction because we restated and paraphrased the question. We mentioned all 3 types of data. We mentioned all 5 cities, and we even got in that it's all happening, or that these results are only from the last 4 weeks, in the last 4 weeks. Now, let's see the overview. Overall, buying fresh coffee was the least common choice in all cities. Moreover, Adelaide was the only city where more of the residents chose to buy instant coffee than visiting cafes. So in our overview, we kept it nice, short, and simple, and we mentioned the points from our outline that we wanted to mention, such as fresh coffee being the least common and the exception of Adelaide. Now, if we look at main body number 1, in terms of visiting cafes, a significantly greater portion of residents in Sydney, Melbourne, and Hobart chose to go to a cafe, with Melbourne and Hobart at approximately 64 and 63%, and Sydney just below at 61%. While Sydney and Melbourne had significantly higher percentages of people choosing to buy fresh coffee, 44 and 42%, Brisbane and Adelaide had notably lower rates than other cities, with both cities at 34%. Now, again, we simply wrote down the ideas from our outline. We mentioned that there are the 3 cities that were visiting cafes the most: Sydney, Melbourne, and Hobart. And we mentioned that Sydney and Melbourne bought the most fresh coffee, and that Brisbane and Adelaide were much lower than the other cities. So this is a pretty great main body 1. It's very simple, and the reason that it was so easy to write this is because we made an outline first. Now, moving on to main body number 2. Regarding instant coffee, Hobart and Brisbane saw the highest consumption rates at roughly 54 and 53% respectively. Meanwhile, Adelaide was the only city where this figure surpassed cafe attendance, standing at 50% compared to 49% for cafes. Now, again, all we had to do here was just follow our outline. The actual writing should be the easiest part of answering these questions. If you just take a couple minutes to look at the graphs, don't worry about the time, spend 2 to 5 minutes, that's the typical range, is 2 to 5 minutes, just looking. Ask yourself those key questions. What were the high points? What were the low points? Are there any patterns or trends? Are there any exceptions? Is anything very unique? Just write down all the important information that you can find using those questions, then organize it, then start writing. It will be so much easier than if you just go ahead and try to start writing. Now, if you have any questions about how I wrote this, or if anything was unclear in this video, let me know in the comments and I will get back to you. But until the next video, I wish you good luck and keep practicing.